Okay, so welcome back to the Healthy Middle Ground podcast. This episode is about recovering from C-section. Now, I'm a bit of an expert when it comes to this, I have to say, not only because I've done extensive training in like postnatal training and whatever with postnatal women, but also because I've had 3 C-sections myself. And so I've done this 3 times. And the reason why I wanted to make this podcast episode is because I come across a lot of women who have really unrealistic expectations about what it's going to be like after a C-section, and they sort of get in a bit of a negative loop about like, oh my God, I'm never gonna be able to walk again. I'm never gonna be able to lift weights again. I'm like C-sections are brutal on the body, and it can be really shocking just how fucked you are postpartum. But again, I think that women sort of don't have, because we don't talk about this very much, or because I haven't really seen many resources that are very realistic about C-section recovery. We kind of have in our heads that we're just going to kind of like jump back up or whatever, or maybe we've seen friends who've had a vaginal birth who are walking around straight after the birth and stuff like that, and we kind of expect it to be like that. And I find that unrealistic expectations kind of ruins everything, and it ruins your ability to actually progress. And I noticed that in all areas of my work, just like fat loss in general and strength training and all of that. But it really shows up postpartum, and it really shows up in women who've had C-sections, especially if they've had an unplanned C-section like I did. First, I wanted to have, like an unmedicated home birth with like Indian pipe music in the background and someone fanning me with a palm leaf and feeding me grapes. Like I had like very high expectations for my first birth, and it ended up an absolute train wreck, and I had an emergency C-section. And I was just absolutely horrified by how fucked my body was after. But I think my superpower is like my ability to like accept reality and accept what is, like this radical acceptance of like what is, and then be like, okay, this is the situation, right? I can't like get up on my own. I can't poo by myself. I can't straighten my body up. This is where I'm at, right? This is where I'm at. And so I have to work from here. I have to work with what I've got. I think a lot of women, again, not just when it comes to C-sections or postpartum recovery, but in a lot of different areas, are like, oh, I shouldn't feel this way. It shouldn't be like this. Oh, I was like this before the birth. Oh, I wish I was like that. Oh, my friend is like this. I should be more like her. I should be able to do what she can do. And as long as you're in that place of like comparison, like comparing to other people, comparing to where you were at before, and like as long as you're shoulding all over yourself with like, I should be here, I should be there, I should be able to do this, you just get stuck. You're not able to move forward, and you just kind of drown in like resentment. So I always say to people, like the only way to make progress in whatever it is, right? Whether it's after a C-section, whether it's after a natural birth, whether you had babies 10 years ago and you now you're 20 kilos overweight and you haven't done any exercise. The first step is radical acceptance of where you are. And once you fully accept where you are, with no judgment, with no kind of shoulds or shoulda, coulda, woulda, like once you fully accept where you are, then you can start to move forward. And this is so important after C-section. So the first thing I want to say about C-section, I want to talk about like, what C-section recovery feels like. And I'm going to sort of use my own journey as an example and to give some milestones, although, don't feel like this is like hard and fast, like it has to be like this. But I just want to be able to illustrate the example. First thing I want to say is that like right after a C-section, like, I mean, when you're wheeled out of the operating room and you're taken into the recovery room and then you're taken into the ward, right? you are absolutely fucked, right? Your whole body is in shock. You have been cut open. They've taken your uterus out. They've taken the baby out. They've sewn you all back together and you are in a right state, okay? And I don't think most women are prepared for that feeling of being so like crippled. Like you can't get up, you can't do anything in the initial stages. And it can be quite a shock. Again, it gets better. Every day it gets better, right? But the first like initial shock can be really, really, really overwhelming. And every day can feel like a year because it's just such an overwhelming experience. I mean, on top of being physically crippled, you also have like a baby that you need to look after. And if this is your first baby and your first C-section, it's so much to take on board. So like the first thing I want to say is that like if you have had a C-section and you're like totally overwhelmed with all of this, like know that this is normal. Like it's a really big deal, right? What's happened to your body is a really big deal. C-sections are amazing. They're life-saving. I'm so grateful for my C-sections, but they are mental, right? It's mental what the body goes through. So you got to give yourself, you got to have realistic expectations. You got to give yourself time to heal. So the way it looks for me was the first like 24 hours, I didn't even get up out of bed. I had a catheter in. They wanted me to, I held my baby and tried to breastfeed and things like that, but somebody else had to hand me the baby. I was expected to just stay in bed. I like tried to get a good night's sleep. And then the next morning, they take the catheter out and then you have to go and pee. And then, the next step is to poo, but that normally takes a few days. I found after my second and my third C-section that after that first night's sleep, I was encouraged to get up really, really quickly. I was with my first as well, but with my second and my third, I was actually able to move around a little bit. It was painful, but I was actually able to move around a little bit because all of the pain medication hadn't worn off from the surgery yet. So I kind of got a few hours of like relief while I was taking the ibuprofen and the Acamol, like paracetamol afterwards. But before all of the pain stuff from the surgery had worn off, I was a little bit mobile, but that disappeared like after the first few hours. And I was really in a lot of pain. Like I couldn't it was like the toilet was about 5 meters away. I couldn't get to the toilet on my own. I needed somebody to like hold a lot of my weight. I needed help getting onto the toilet, getting off the toilet. It was very, very, very painful and very difficult. And it took me about a day. So like the first day I just spent like hobbling around my room, trying to get up but resting a lot in between. And it was only after my first C-section, it was only about 3 or 4 days later that I actually left my room and went into the corridor and tried to like walk into like, the common space sort of area. And there I saw other women who had C-sections that day or the day before, and they were walking around way better than me. And like, that's where the comparison started going in. Like, oh my God, like I'm so much worse than that person. Like I should be able to do that. And you have to kind of block all of that stuff out because there are individual differences. And the nurses told me as well, some women are more mobile postpartum than others. A couple of years ago, I went to visit my friend who had just had her second C-section. And I went to visit her the day after her C-section. And she came to open the door for me. And she had walked like 100 meters, maybe 50 meters, down the corridor, pushing her baby in one of those trolleys, come and open the door for me. And then she just like walked back, just like really, really easily. And I was like, how are you walking like this? You only had a C-section yesterday. She was like, I don't know, I feel fine. Again, like comparison is the thief of joy. Like it is normal and okay if you're like that friend of mine, but it is also normal and okay if you feel like you've been hit by a bus and you're progressing at a much slower rate. I personally, it took me a long time to recover. Again, first few days was like about hobbling to the toilet, having help. I needed help on day one to have a shower, which was very humiliating and awful. I really didn't like not being able to do that by myself. And the first week was about moving around my space. I went home and I was in the hospital for a week with my second and my third. I went home after 3 or 4 days. But it was really about just moving around my space, moving around trying to move as much as possible. And every day I could move a little bit more. After the first week, so on day 7, after my first C-section, I came home and I said, right, I want to go for a walk outside. I need to get outside. So I put a timer on and I started shuffling down my road like an old lady. And I managed to walk or shuffle for 6 minutes. And then I was like, I can't go any further because I'm not going to make it back home. So I turned around, I walked back. So I did 12 minutes in total. And again, right, this was 7 days after the C-section. And the temptation is to be like, oh my God, I'm so broken. This is all I can do. This is so ridiculous. I can only walk for 12 minutes. I'm completely disabled. I'm completely fucked. But again, my superpower is to be like, radically accept whatever is the reality. And I just said, okay, right, I can do 12 minutes of walking now. Great. I'm going to start with 12 minutes and every day I'm going to do 1 more minute. And I literally did that. I went for a walk twice a day, once in the morning and once in the evening, on top of like just moving around my house. And on day 2, this is day 8, but you know what I mean, day 2 of my walking challenge, I walked for 7 minutes and then 7 minutes back. So I did 14 minutes the next day, and I did the same in the evening. Then I did 8 minutes and 8 minutes. And by the end of the second week, I was doing whatever, like 20 minutes, 30 minutes, something like that. And I was walking upright. I was like more mobile, moving more fluidly rather than being all hunched over, because like you do tend to hunch over in the beginning. And I was by the end of the second week, I was also starting to taper off and take a little bit less of the pain medications. For the first 2 weeks, I was just round the clock taking ibuprofen, Acamol or paracetamol, and Optalgine, which is a really strong painkiller that you get in Israel, but it's not available, I think, in countries like the UK. So I was just like round the clock taking these. I had timers on to make sure that every 4 hours I was taking something. But I had the big thing was that my mindset was like, it doesn't even matter what I should be like at the moment. It doesn't matter what other people are like at this stage. I have to focus on like where I'm at now and build from there. There's no other option. Like I can't, wishing I was, you know, as mobile as someone else that I had seen wasn't going to get me anything. So I just had to be radically accepting of where I was, and then I could build from there. I also want to say that within that first week, I started doing some very basic mobility movement. Now, obviously, you can't really do very much, but what I would do is I would stand up and put my hands on the back of a chair, and then I would do a kind of modified cat-cow, just stretching my back out, just rounding my back and arching my back and doing some like twists through the spine. I would do some like, you know, shoulder circles, and then like try and move my arms around in circles. I stretched out my wrists, I stretched out my ankles, like doing a little bit of a like calf stretch. I do some really small hip circles. This is like on day 3 or 4. And I just do sort of like 5 minutes of that and then sit back down, stretching out my neck, things like that. And then each day, again, I would do just a little bit more. I'd find I was able to just move another body part. And my approach was to start distally, so starting with the extremities, starting with, you know, no matter how crippled you are, you can stretch your neck out, right? You know, no matter how crippled you are, you can do a little, you can put your wrist backwards and stretch out your wrist. You can stretch your calf, right? So I started on those extremities, and then I started moving closer in towards the center of my body, which is where obviously the C-section incision is. I started then, just sort of bending forwards a little bit and then straightening myself up fully, just into a fully standing position, which felt like a bit of a stretch because I was quite hunched over. And again, starting from about day 3 or 4, I started doing 5 minutes of mobility here and there, but then built that up. So it was a slightly longer mobility session. I was doing more and more things. And again, by the end of the second week, I was able to bend over forwards and touch my toes. I could hold onto a table and grab my foot so that I could stretch out the front of my quad a little bit, or the front of my thigh. I couldn't go very far because it felt like it was going to rip me open. And I could just do slightly more things like bigger arm circles, holding onto a chair. I could do some like hip circles and lift one foot off the floor and make circles with my knee. So that was like my first 2 weeks of recovery, is just trying to walk a little bit more and spend more time on my feet, and then just slowly incorporating very gentle stretches and mobility movements. And I kept doing that. Well, that was like the first 3 weeks of my recovery. And then when I got to week 3, that's when I started doing some very, very, very gentle strength exercises. So I did squats, for example. I took a chair and did like just really short range of motion squats all the way like down to a chair that was very high, so above parallel, so not breaking parallel with my leg. I did 10 reps of that. And like a 4 kilo shoulder press and a 4 kilo row. And I think on the first day that I did that, 3 weeks postpartum, I just left it at that. I think I also lied down on the floor and did a small crunch. You got to remember, I was getting out of bed by this point, so a crunch is like really not that big a deal. I do this thing called a crunch and a heel slide, where you hold the crunch and then you straighten out one leg at a time. And I did some glute bridges, right? So I was able to get up and down from the floor by week 3 and so I had this very, very, very basic strength program, very, very light, and a lot less than my daily tasks. That's really, really, really important. And then I just built from there. So it's like 2-3 times a week, I would just do that same workout. And I first of all worked on just increasing the range of motion in my squats, and just doing another set, doing a second set, then doing a third set, and just did gradually, again, 2-3 workouts a week, just gradually building up slightly. By the time that was week 3 to 6 for me, where I just kept it really, really, really light, not even really looking like a workout at all. Now, I do want to emphasize that, like, before I got pregnant, I was squatting 50 kilos. And at the end of my pregnancy, I was still squatting 30 kilos. So, this is a big drop down for me, right? To be squatting, not through full range of motion, and just be doing 10 sets, no weight whatsoever. But again, it was radical acceptance of what can I do without pain, and then build from there. And I was very, very systematic and very disciplined in saying, okay, I'm just gonna do a few more reps today. I'm just gonna do a little bit more range of motion today. I'm gonna do a little bit, do an extra set today. I just built it up very gradually. By the time I got to the 6-week mark and I got cleared for exercise, I already had a base, right? I wasn't super strong. I wasn't going straight back into hard workouts or anything like that, but it meant that I could go back to full range of motion squats. I think I did like 5 kilo squats that first week. I started lifting like a 10 kilo kettlebell. Bearing in mind I have small children, and again, this 6-week mark, right? By the time you get to that 6-week mark, if you've been gradually building up since week 3, you can do a few things. But I wasn't back to doing a full workout. I wasn't putting a barbell on my back and things like that. I just kept building 2-3 workouts a week, just kept building slightly more weight each time over a number of months. And then I got to the point where I'm like, 3 months postpartum, and now I'm squatting barbells. Now I can do a couple of pull-ups. Now I'm rowing a 10 kilo kettlebell. I think around the 3 month, I maybe a little bit earlier, but after my third C-section, but around the 3 month mark, I started running again. But again, I didn't just go and smash myself to pieces. I was already doing longish walks, like 30 minutes plus. I built up my walks to 30 minutes. I didn't really have more time than that to be going for like really long walks. But then what I started doing is I'd go for my walk and I'd do 1 minute of running, and then I'd walk, and then 1 minute of running, then I'd walk, then 1 minute of running, then I'd walk. And maybe I did 3 1-minute runs on my first run. And then I built from there. I increased the number of 1-minute runs I did, and then eventually did 2 minutes, and built it up till I was spending longer periods of time running. And then I got to the point where I could run for like 30 minutes straight. But again, that happened over a number of months. Again, this is 3 months postpartum that I started, right? Like, what I could have done is I could have beaten myself up and been like, God, I feel so heavy. I can only run for 1 minute at a time. This is so terrible. I've lost all my fitness. Other women are back running 2 weeks postpartum. I should be able to do this. I should be able to do that. Like, if you do that and should all over yourself and think about what you wish you could do and how much strength you've lost and how much fitness you've lost, and just like stew in all of that, like regret and comparison and like, you know, beating yourself up that it's not enough. If you do that, you won't get anywhere, right? I typically see this, that the women that are beating themselves up the most and have all this like shit going on in their head about how they should be doing X, Y, and Z, they are the ones who don't progress, right? And the ones who can just, because they just don't do anything, because they feel like they should be able to do so much more, and then their expectations are so high, and then because they can't do what they think they should do, they just don't do it. Or they do what they think they should do, they smash themselves to pieces, they either injure themselves or they just get incredibly sore and incredibly tired after the workout, and then they're like, well, I can't do that, so there's no point doing anything. Instead of just going, okay, well, what can I do? Can I do 10 partial range of motion squats? Can I row 4-kilo dumbbell? Okay, that's what I can do. Once you accept this is what I can do, you can kind of build from there. So I guess just to summarize, my message here is that it is normal to feel like you've been hit by a train after you've had a C-section. There's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing that you've done wrong. That's just the way you feel when you've been cut in half and had a baby pulled out of you. You have to be patient with the process, and you have to have radical acceptance of where you are in order to be able to then actually do something about it and progress from that point. One of the things I didn't talk about in this podcast that I did want to talk about was like kind of nutrition and things like that immediately after the C-section to help you with recovery. But I think I'll cover that in a separate podcast because I really just want to focus on like the physical recovery here. The first week or two is really just about becoming a little bit more mobile, walking a little bit more around your space, maybe getting a couple of short walks outside after week 1, and doing some very gentle mobility standing mobility exercises. From week 3 to 4, you can start doing something that looks a little bit like strength exercises, but they're very, very, very gentle. And you can sort of just progress gradually from there to week 6. Don't expect to be where you were pre-pregnancy at that week 6 mark. That's where you'll get the okay to exercise, but do not just dive back into whatever you were doing pre-pregnancy, whether that's running or that's a class or that's strength training. You have to kind of keep increasing gradually from wherever you started at 3-4 weeks postpartum. And just think about gradually progressing a little bit more each week until and get stronger, rather than suddenly diving back into what you were doing before. That will just end up, in the best case scenario, you're going to end up ruined from the workout, really fatigued and really sore. And worst case scenario, you're going to injure yourself. So yeah, don't do that. And you have to have compassion for yourself. You have to have that radical acceptance of where you're at and work from there. But you also have to be pragmatic, right? You can't just wallow in like self-pity of like, this is so shit, I feel so awful, I'm just gonna like eat chocolate and not do anything about it, right? Because nobody's coming to save you. Nobody is going to be able to help you recover and help you get in the best shape you can after having a C-section. You have to be really pragmatic about it. Pick yourself up, do what you can do, put one foot in front of the other, and just keep on working every day towards feeling a little bit stronger, a little bit better, being able to do more and more things. If you need help with this, because it's not easy to know, and it's not very intuitive always to know exactly what you need to do. So if you need help with this, I have an online program called the Complete Postpartum Program that has 4 levels of mobility, strength, and core that you can do after C-section, you can do after a normal birth. I can help guide you on exactly what level you need to do. I also have a level 0, which is a kind of hit by a bus level, which is you do prior to level 1. If if you're starting early, you're starting after a C-section, for example, it helps you build up to being able to get up and down from the floor in a very gentle, progressive way. So I'll link that below, the Complete Postpartum Program. That's my kind of group program. And if you need more personalized help than that, I have a one-on-one online program where I help women and mums in general lose weight, build muscle, and improve their relationship with food. And I can absolutely help with the C-section recovery or normal birth recovery, whatever it is. That's like, if sometimes people need a little bit more personalized help in that area and can't kind of just follow a group program. So there's those 2 options. If you do want to talk to me about coaching, there's a link, I'll link below to set up a call so that we can chat and see if it's a good fit or if you'd be better off on the Complete Postpartum Program. I hope you found that useful. Let me know your comments, your feedback, your thoughts. I'd love to hear how you found this podcast, if you found it helpful, or if there's anything that you would add.